In this mini module, I'm going to start talking about the different types of cybercrime that we know occur. We'll focus more probably on the hacking and cyber attacks and cyber fraud and digital piracy, but also we'll examine cyberbullying, cyber pornography, internet sex crimes, and cyber terrorism. Now, in discussing each of these types of crime, what we'll see is there are many different patterns with each type of offense. The context helps to determine how these offenses are carried out, why they're carried out, and how we respond to those offenses. And in this sense, it's key to recognize that cybercrime is a multifaceted problem that, again, stems from various frameworks or various groups being involved in behaviors that are technologically driven. And the reason this is important for our purposes is the interdisciplinary perspective. To truly understand these offenses, we need to look at them through an interdisciplinary lens. So as we talk about these offenses, we're going to consider a couple of different questions. We're going to talk about the specific varieties of each type of crime. I'll talk some about the patterns that have been identified for these offenses, who engages in these offenses, why did they commit the crimes, and for each type of offense, we're going to ask the question, how would other disciplines such as information technology, business, philosophy, engineering, and computer science address each type? Here what we'll see is none of the disciplines are able to fully address these offenses on their own, but instead, when we bring together the disciplines and we bring together individuals who have training in each of the disciplines, a better, more holistic response is provided to these offenses. So let's start with hackers. Generally speaking, we can identify 7 different types of hackers. First, we can talk about the state hacker or the state-sponsored hacker. These are individuals who are hired by a government to hack into the computer infrastructure of other governments or businesses. Now, these hackers, they could be working directly for the government. It could be a contract-type situation. But here, these hackers have the potential to create much more harm than other types of hackers because they have a lot of money. And we'll come back to this one as well as each of these. Hacktivists are hackers who hack as a form of activism, and they use their hacking to publicize perceived wrongs. You've probably heard of Anonymous as one of the examples. Insider hackers, these are hackers that steal from a company. Script kiddies are young kids or inexperienced hackers. I'll talk more about them in a moment. Vulnerability hackers are professional hackers, and they make money off of hacking professionally to help others learn how to stop their system from being hacked. Empirical hackers are researchers who study hacking and try to hack in order to generate scholarly information. And white hat hackers are those that are hacking on behalf of a company or a business so they can improve the security of that company or business. So let's dive into and unpack each of these types. State-sponsored hackers. These are some of the types of hacks that we see increasing, becoming more popular. I have the picture of Seth Rogen there because after he was his movie was coming out a few years ago, it was alleged that North Korea wasn't too fond of the way that this particular movie portrayed North Korea. So the allegations were that North Korea breached the Sony infrastructure, technological infrastructure, and they released all sorts of emails. Very fascinating, the kinds of emails they released. In the comments, there were allegations that, or emails about Angelina Jolie and what producers, things like that, and just correspondences that were never meant to be public. Movies had been released in the past that had been hacked into, and the sponsoring group would release them ahead of time. Now, state-sponsored hackers, this is, again, when nations or businesses are paid by nations to hack. It's been alleged that Russia spent recently $300 million and hired 1,000 hackers to target 100 countries. This was a news report from a year or two ago. China's also been identified as a nation using similar tactics. Now, when we talk about these notions, these are very much related to cyber warfare, which we'll talk about more, but also nations might pay hackers to test vulnerabilities. In February 2017, the U.S. Digital Service had a Hack the Pentagon series where they encouraged people to try to hack into the Pentagon so they could learn about what the vulnerabilities were. And this type of hacking might be more a vulnerability hacker or white hat hacker, but I suggest it here because a nation, the U.S., was actually promoting hacking, but against itself, so that we could determine our vulnerabilities. Hacktivist. Hacktivist, you'll see, combines the terms hacking and political activism, and this is instances where hacking is done for political reasons. You think about activism, you think about hacking. Hacking plus activism is hacktivism. And there's a couple of different strategies that might be used. One is what's called the virtual blockade, where individuals might visit a website and create excessive traffic to limit access to the website. So a group of individuals who want to stop that website, get a bunch of people on there. And it's analogous, I would think, to if you have people physically standing in front of a building because they want to stop people from getting in. In this sense, swarming occurs where a bunch of people visit and the website can't handle all the visits and fails to serve others. Email bombs and ping attacks are another type of hacktivism. These are instances where groups will send thousands of emails simultaneously to target a particular individual or a particular business, and in a sense to stop that, or to send a message to that business that the hacktivists don't agree with their thinking. Web hacking and computer break-ins, this would be an instance where hacktivists actually get into a particular account and unlawfully enter and hack through the internet or through the computer break-ins and damage or deface. It's analogous, I would think, to you hear of instances where PETA throws paint on people who wear fur. In this sense, though, the activism occurs in cyberspace rather than physical space, and those would be examples of hacktivism. Empirical hackers. As I mentioned earlier, these are hackers that do it for research. A few years ago, 2 researchers showed how a car could be hacked. After those researchers did this, 1.4 million cars were recalled. Research labs have been set up. We have one at Old Dominion University. Many strong cybersecurity research institutions have these research labs that are separate from the organization's network. Honeypots, where essentially we're inviting potential hackers in so we can study that hacking behavior, and we can study it in the network. Students might also be empirical hackers, but if you're researching hacking, You must follow your instructor's guidelines. You can't hack outside of approved virtual environment that's removed from the organization or the government's network that you might be researching the hacking on. Don't try to hack in and change your grade. If you do that, you might be successful for a moment, but it would be bad. So we do recognize again that there are people who hack for research purposes, and those are empirical hackers. There's also insiders who are hackers, and we mentioned white-collar crime earlier, and inside hackers are an example of white-collar crime. In fact, insiders are one of the biggest threats to a company's security, and the vulnerabilities that insiders can pose or that surface with insiders can be particularly salient. An author a few years ago, Shaw and colleagues, wrote specifically about the psychology of the dangerous insider. And we know over time that inside hacks are often traced to recently fired employees. But we also know there's some other factors that contribute to these crimes. Shaw's research studies cited by Shaw points to things like introversion, ethical flexibility, reduced loyalty, entitlement as being factors. Now, entitlement, reduced loyalty, these kind of relate to the techniques of neutralization that were discussed earlier. But they look at them just from a more psychological rather than a sociological lens. Businesses might not report an experience of a hack, and their decisions not to report would stem from things like being afraid that the public would lose confidence in them. If we knew that a company hired someone who was stealing from the company and committing cyber offenses, it reflects on the company and their decision making. There's also the point that calling in the police and the courts may cost too much. So companies may decide not to report insider offending because of the exorbitant cost that might actually come along with and stem from bringing in the criminal justice system. We also don't tell people because we don't want everyone to know what our vulnerabilities are. And if we call in and make it public, call the police, call the courts, and make it public that one of our workers was able to expose or access data or information or resources through cyber offending, that would become public. You tell the police, you tell the courts, it becomes public, and that may expose the vulnerabilities of the business or company, and so they choose not to report. And they may not know how the hack occurred. They may not know that an insider, how the insider did it. We should also say they may not know that the insider even committed the crime. It's a very simple point. Insiders can get away with these offenses, and if they get away with it and no one knows about it, then it would be the case that the company would not report to the police. Another variety, in addition to insiders, another type of hacker that we mentioned is our script kiddies. Our script kiddies, these are the least sophisticated types of hackers. They do this out of boredom. They do it out of thrill-seeking. They don't do as much damage as other hackers. They're younger than other hackers, and they seek acceptance from the hacking subculture. But experienced hackers aren't real fond of these script kiddies. It's been said that these script kiddies are using, in a sense, recipe books for how to hack, and that they're learning about hacking simply by following a list of steps about how to do it. And that's why the traditional hacking subculture isn't as interested in or and doesn't hold in high regard these script kiddies, their sophistication.